Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Hey, it is dotNYC number 4. We're still learning what the hell we're doing. We don't have the faintest idea, as you can see from the evidence. And we're playing around and trying new stuff all the time. So I'm delighted to be here, delighted to be on the Twit Network. This is the CUNY Graduate School of Journalism. dotNYC is a new podcast about tech and New York. And with me is the bridge to all the ands in technology and media, Justin Hendrix.
Good morning.
Who is thank you, Justin. It's great to be here. Justin is the head of the
NYC Media Lab.
And so tell us about that for a second.
NYC Media Lab is a project in New York City. It's a consortium of multiple universities in the city. CUNY is one of the participating universities. Consortium of those universities, and then a bunch of media and communications companies. So they range from the Associated Press and Audible onto Viacom and Verizon. And we do R&D projects at the intersection of the interests of those corporate members and faculty and students on the campuses.
And you bring in all kinds of great projects. It's in Brooklyn. It's in the heart of the new
That's
hip
right.
universe.
We work out of the NYU School of Engineering in downtown Brooklyn.
And we like you anyway.
Thank you.
So, just a couple things in the news to talk about first before we have some great guests, including Jen Hensley from LinkNYC, who's going to be bringing the internet to all around New York. When Leo Laporte was here in New York, we got all excited when we saw one of these obelisks of web access, and it's not working yet. But we got excited. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the NYC Parks Periscope channel and some other stuff as well. So, in the news, I just came from breakfast. I dashed in with Eric Newton, who used to be at the Knight Foundation, which is the primary funder of journalism activities in the U.S. And full disclosure, I had something called the Tau Knight Center here at CUNY. And Eric is now at Arizona State University as doing innovation. But this morning, the Knight Foundation announced a gigantic $60 million project with Columbia University. And I would be jealous, but they have certain special characteristics that make this happen around the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. And Eric explained to me that this is about, obviously, the law. It is about journalism and media, and it's also now about engineering and technology. And so the way he told me about this is that we're at a point now where First Amendment is not just about protecting newspapers, obviously. Right. First Amendment is about protecting speech across all these new platforms from all these new speakers who couldn't be heard before, now can be heard, and to take an active role in protecting this most precious of our rights.
Right.
So I think it's a big deal. It's a big deal for New York that this is centered here, and it's a huge amount of money. I think they're going to $5 million each, and then $25 million endowment each, and then they're going to raise some more money on top of that. And this is about protecting the First Amendment, which I think is critical at a time when I think that Americans don't value this special thing enough.
There are a lot of questions, obviously, in the news every day that sort of tie back to this, from court cases to problems with the tech companies that we see playing out in the headlines. I've only read a little bit about the announcement about the Columbia project, but it sounds perfectly timed. It seems like it's absolutely a necessary investigation, and it seems right that it's going to happen here in New York, actually.
Yeah, I think it is. Better than Washington, D.C., by the way, because it's not just about government law. It is also about these industries that depend upon the First Amendment and that are dealing with it. Let's take an example now, which is the case from last week. I wasn't on This Week in Google last week because I was in Mexico City. So it's a little bit stale news, but I didn't get to have a chance to pontificate about this last week there. Is the case of Facebook and the Gizmodo story that allegedly there was a secret conference room where young whippersnappers were dared to edit the trending report, and included in the allegation from one of them, a conservative, him or herself, was that they were particularly targeting and keeping off conservative news.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that story?
You know, there's been so much written, and to me, whether this particular incident was the cause for great controversy or concern, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem like it. I feel like most of the commentators I've read sort of come down on that, on the side of that argument. But it did feel like a sort of watershed moment, a moment of awakening for a lot of people who maybe didn't understand this issue in great detail. And I think we'll see, many more moments like this as people sort of wake up to the idea that the information they're seeing over social networks on the internet could potentially be manipulated in some way, either on purpose or just through disregard. And that, I think, is the main story. That's the thing. People are aware now, and it's becoming more it's seeping into the public consciousness.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that, but
Sure.
So I wrote a piece on Medium called "Facebook Needs an Editor," and arguing not to edit.
Yeah.
But instead, an editor who I think would be more of a public advocate within the world of Facebook. My reaction was that first and foremost, I barely noticed Facebook trending.
Yeah.
I never clicked on it. I found
only
it
out
was,
of the corner of your eye, right?
It was kind of taboola,
Yeah, sure.
outbrain virus. It's the things I'm now trained never to click on.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody tells me that's hot, I'm not clicking there because I'm going to be going down a rabbit hole. Second, from Twitter, we've long presumed that because it says trending, not hottest, not most important, not most traffic, that it's manipulated in some way,
Right,
algorithmically or humanly. It's manipulated to try to push things they think are going to click. I've assumed that's the case at Twitter. I've assumed that's the case here. Third, I don't think Gawker is a company to exactly lecture us on journalistic sterling standards. Fourth, I think it's critical that this idea that there's a black box where judgments are being made. Well, that's
Right.
called journalism.
Right.
Right? In this building where the New York Herald Tribune was edited, next door where the New York Times is edited, they're quite opaque in how they decide what you should know.
Sure.
And what they think is trending and what they think is important and what they think is cool. We call that news judgment. Indeed, I almost wish that the kids in that conference room at Facebook instead would take over CNN and bring a little of that same news judgment there, where they're giving tons of time to a certain New York demagogue who's now headed down the way, getting way too much attention out of anything that I would call journalistic news judgment. So the weird thing, Mark Andreessen does these great tweets where he'll put the contrary opinion, right? Technology is good. It's going to change everything.
Absolutely.
Technology is bad because it changes nothing. So in this case, I think that the Andreessen-style tweet should have been something about how, oh my God, algorithms are taking over for humans. Oh my God, humans are involved in algorithms.
But I think people are instinctively responding to something they don't maybe necessarily understand. The CTO of Facebook was at a conference in New York a couple of months ago, an AI conference that was held at NYU, and he was talking about the future of artificial intelligence. He mentioned that they have 700 machine learning engineers working on the platform, making trillions of predictions a day. And when you you think about traditional media, how many machine learning engineers are there in the whole of the news industry? There's a kind of a mismatch there, and whether it technically matters or not, I think it puts people in a place where they're frightened of the implications of it, what it means to have the world sort of delivered to them through this filter, this algorithmic filter.
Right, but so the fear in the past was there's this mysterious black box algorithm that's making decisions and pushing things on you, right? And that's always been the controversy.
Absolutely.
And now the controversy is, oh my God, humans mucked around with the algorithm.
But there was sort of an understanding that many of these institutions, who had leaders who had been trained in places like the CUNY School of Journalism, there were certain practices, there were certain sort of ethical principles that were baked into these organizations, especially the ones that were trusted. So your point about having a public editor at Facebook makes some sense, but probably needs to go far beyond that. Way more transparency in the way the technology works, way more public disclosure. Some people have suggested things like some kind of public board. And whether that would work or not, we're early days, but it does tie very much back to the Columbia.
That's exactly where I was
$60 million, because these are the types of questions that are going to be important throughout the 21st century. And what is news beyond news, into data, into many other fields, the way information comes at us, the way our information is manipulated by the companies that offer us services. It's all going to tie back to these questions.
Right, and when we've talked about transparency in the past, I hear this from journalists all the time. The algorithm should be transparent as if they're news meetings or not, but we'll leave that to the side. But then I say, what would you do with a transparent algorithm? You'd game it.
Right.
You'd try to get your stories higher up. But I think the point you just made is really important. That the transparency we need is not to the functioning of the algorithm or the functioning of a news meeting. The transparency we need is to the principles that govern them.
That's right.
And to think about those principles, know someone is thinking about those principles. Someone's
That's
there.
right.
I can get to a human being to say you've got the wrong principle in operation.
Because algorithms have the same problems people do. In fact, algorithms are just expressions of principles that people have written into the computer. The thing to remember is that algorithms make mistakes they don't even intend to make as well. So there's a great woman at Columbia University, Roxana Giabasu, who's done a lot of work. She testified at PrivacyCon, the FTC's big conference on privacy recently. She's done a lot of work looking at unintended discrimination that occurs due to algorithmic, services. Everything from your Gmail to, and we've seen other evidence of this, to Amazon deciding who to deliver same day to based on, seemingly statistics or numbers that end up excluding the poor, right? So there are lots of these issues sort of baked into this.
Okay, so you bring up the FTC. This is the heart of where my fears go, which is calls to, regulate Facebook in a way that we would never consider, in this country at least, maybe Europe's different, but in this country we would never consider to regulate the New York Times,
right,
or even the New York Post, or even Fox News. That if we have the cloak of news and journalism around it, the First Amendment takes effect. To my mind, Facebook has, and others have said this online in the last week, a First Amendment right to choose what to put in that little box on Facebook. And that we now have a senator demanding Mark Zuckerberg come to Jesus in Washington,
right,
and explain why this is happening. I'm not sure it's the right of that senator to demand crap of Mark Zuckerberg. Is an algorithm an expression of free speech?
I think we have to be very careful, and hopefully initiatives like the one at Columbia will be part of that, part of us thinking through these problems deeply. And not responding to the news and passing legislation or regulation just as a result of singular incidents like this. That would be unfortunate, I think. But, I also think that this all ties back to, maybe, are we leaving him nameless, the GOP presumptive presidential nominee?
No, you can say it. Just wash your mouth out after you say it.
I think it ties back to this sort of sense in the country right now that, what the heck's going on? There must be something behind this sort of environment that we've got right now, and perhaps someone's fiddling with the algorithm, and that's messing everybody up.
Well, I'm trying to find it just for. See, that's the other thing we do on Twig shows is we don't worry about staring at the camera, and we look at our computer. We're trying to find something because there was a great piece this last week. Greg Esterbrook. When did optimism become uncool?
Yeah.
Right. I thought it was a wonderful piece. I say that as an optimist.
Yeah.
And I think we're here in a land of trying to do that. But it's exactly that point you just made, Justin. Is that there's this perception now that things are broken and uncool and a mess and it becomes dystopian.
Yep.
And Obama's I'm not trying to get political, honestly, but Obama's arguments of the last few commencement speeches are, things are a lot better off than anybody's saying. What leads us to this dark, cloudy view? And then that, in turn, influences the actions that we take as a society.
Yeah, I think people feel that instinctively. They're trying to understand what's going on. Why are these tensions, just really, really boiling over at the moment? What's driving that? And maybe people are looking for some explanation to this phenomena and somehow maybe Facebook's responsible somehow.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's maybe it's perfect for this venue. It's a very loosely formed or poorly formed thought, but it's something that's occurred to me.
We specialize in poorly formed thoughts. Yes, that's exactly what we do. And I think it's important too because you and I are involved in attempting to be optimistic about New York and technology.
Absolutely.
Right. What kind of arguments do you hear against technology? Do you get kind of labeled as there's the geek guy, or you only hang out with geeks, so it doesn't matter?
I think I am immersed, obviously, in the geekdom in New York City a bit. So I'm sort of part of that group. But it's interesting to me. I mean, one of the sort of startups that we have here in our notes in front of us, I think, is interesting in this regard.
Please.
If I can transition into that, there's a company called what'd she call it? Where is it at here? She calls it Screen. I read about this from the notes that the producer sent. They've raised $1.9 million to fix your family's tech addiction.
So tell me about that.
It's an interesting article because it's sort of a startup that essentially is a kind of an IoT service that it essentially is going to allow you, as a parent perhaps, to limit the amount of screen time that you and your children are engaging with in the home. So it's going to plug up to your different devices, and let's say you choose between 6 and 8 p.m. There's no screen time in your house, no checking Twitter, Jeff Jarvis. It will essentially disable the device for that time, or disable the Wi-Fi.
What do you think
perhaps.
about that?
I think it's interesting. I think people are beginning to feel the pressures of this sort of content explosion, this social media explosion. They're spending so much time with it. We've seen them eking out every second of the day to remain connected and to consume digital media. And there's sort of almost an organic movement that's sort of springing up, that's sort of saying, well, let's think about this type of consumption. Let's think about the degree to which we're engaging on these platforms, and maybe we should think twice. So I think that's neat, and I do see some sort of evidence of that happening here in New York City. So that just something I wanted to tie the conversation back to.
If we could turn it off while people are crossing the street.
Yes, that would certainly be a good idea.
Might be. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of my problem is I used to be a TV critic, so I couldn't exactly be haughty telling my kids not to watch television when I did it and got paid for it. And there's a drinking game on Twig shows, and every time I say Gutenberg, you can take a
Thank God it's water, right? Yeah.
They didn't give you the tequila. But when we go back to the invention of the book, there were fears that, oh my God, people are spending too much time reading these new book things, and then there's a problem with this. The problem I have with those kinds of movements and startups is that they demonize the tool.
Right.
And the tool is just a tool. And if you make the tool bad, you make that which is good that can be done with it bad also. Yeah,
I hear what you're saying, although I know that I personally have a problem sometimes putting the device down.
Oh, I definitely do.
And do wish that I could look up and perhaps take more joy in the moment, right? So I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing. I don't think it will necessarily become a completely mainstream behavior, but there will be a segment of the culture that will want to do those types of things.
One other thing we should probably mention, since we are at the City University of New York, is that our mayor, Bill de Blasio, just announced an initiative around open data, the NYC Digital Playbook that prioritizes service delivery. No city. Do you know anything more about this?
I haven't read a whole lot about this particular initiatives, but New York City has really been a leader. This is one thing where the city has absolutely been a leader in open data and making data available. And I think it's a great initiative to essentially put more information out, to give people the opportunity to understand the principles that the city is employing when it thinks about data. That I think it again ties back to the conversations that we've been having so far.
Yeah.
So it seems like the right way forward.
So good. Now, from having too much access to your devices in your home, now you can get access to your devices everywhere because we're in New York. We want more and more and more. I want to bring on Jen Hensley from, what is it called? LinkNYC.
Hi there.
Hi there. Good to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks.
You've met Justin.
Hey, Jen.
Of course. Good to see you.
You know each other. Yeah. So explain to the public out there. So all around New York right now, we're seeing these obelisks. We
Kiosks.
as I want to keep the 2001 vision of here that yes, you're right. These as apes we're wondering what they are, trying to figure them out. They are where phone booths used to be, but they're about this wide, or this deep, this wide, that tall. And they have a big sign on saying "Coming soon," and they have little buttons inside. What are they?
They are LinkNYC. They are Wi-Fi kiosks that are bringing gigabit Wi-Fi to the streets of New York. Like you mentioned, along the routes of the former payphones, we're replacing the payphone infrastructure with Wi-Fi kiosks, basically offering free gigabit Wi-Fi to New Yorkers on their own mobile devices. The kiosks also have integrated tablets that provide free domestic phone calls, access to city services, 911 call buttons, internet browsing, wayfinding, and USB charging, all on the streets of New York. There are going to be 7,500 of these at full scale. We have 200 installed already on 3rd Avenue. We're headed up into the Bronx later this month, and 8th Avenue as well. 150 working
150
and 200.
Where are those?
They are on 3rd Avenue, between 14th Street and about up into East Harlem, and on 8th Avenue between Columbus Circle and 14th Street. So we're continuing the build out. We're going as quickly as we possibly can, and we are actually just approaching our 2 millionth Wi-Fi session, and we have over several 100,000 subscribers. So it's New Yorkers are using our links, which is great news.
The geeks in my Twitter feed are posting speed tests,
Right.
and they're all impressed so far. Absolutely.
To your earlier points, though, I think it's important to remember that 1 in 4 New Yorkers does not have internet access in their home or their office, and so while there is a portion of the population that wants to limit their screen time, there's also a lot of New York City that needs this access, and we think we'll do great things with it.
How broad does the coverage work from?
A minimum of 150 feet around each unit. We're seeing in the field upwards of 200 or 300 feet. So, and once you sign on the first time, you're seamlessly passed from link to link, so that as you move through the city, you are going to get your continuous coverage. It's gigabit speed Wi-Fi. We have a dedicated fiber network, and what that means is that your device is the bottleneck. And so our network offers speeds quicker than your laptop or your phone can use. So we think we've really built it to be future-proof and to accommodate the number of people that are going to be on the streets of New York and taking advantage of this.
What's the business model?
It's paid for by advertising on their 55-inch digital displays on either side of the units, replacing the payphone posters, and we're selling those, and that's generating the revenue. It's all privately funded. We're generating approximately $500 million to the city of New York in franchise payments over the life of our contract. So we think it's a really great business model. We think that it provides, obviously, support for the community and for the city, revenue stream for the city, and really great service for every citizen. So
I was driving down the Merritt Parkway this weekend, picking my daughter up at college, and one of the signs on the side of the highway still said, exit, and then it had a big phone. Yeah. You could go find a phone here, and how magnificently quaint that is.
Right. Should you need it, there's a phone.
I think one of the neat things about Link is that maybe you can talk about this, Jen, a little bit. Is the fact that it came out of a competition. So the city ran a competition and said, we've got all these payphones, but everyone's using their mobile devices now. We could replace this infrastructure somehow. What should we do? Opened it up, and then.
That's right. And here we are. Yeah, no, we had the idea of basically replacing this antiquated infrastructure using the locations and the whatever infrastructure there was, conduit and cables, basically to provide a 21st century solution to what the city needs and what people need when they're walking around the city, right? It's no longer you need to drop a quarter in a slot. It's really that you need your mobile device charged, or if you don't have a smartphone, you need access to be able to get in touch with your family, either through a tablet, internet browsing, or through free domestic phone calls that we offer with Vonage on the service.
So a couple questions. Did you have to replace what's behind the scenes? Was it old copper in there?
It was, yep. And we've run new gauge copper wire to power up the units, and then we have a dedicated fiber line that we're running independently of that. A new line, new infrastructure all throughout the 5 boroughs.
Wow. Total cost of
Hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's not easy, but it's, we think that we're laying the groundwork for the future, and really that capacity is going to be something that's going to serve the city for decades or centuries to come.
Is this going on anywhere else in the world?
Lots of cities have tried free Wi-Fi. It's extremely hard, I think, to find a business model that works. I think the density of New York combined with the infrastructure of the existing payphones made this a really compelling solution for us. And we think that it's uniquely positioned here to be successful. But we are looking at other cities, and we are looking at an ad-based revenue model through Intersection and in cooperation with Sidewalk Labs, a Google company. We're exploring where this might be viable elsewhere.
So talk about the Sidewalk Labs relationship. It's started to try to reinvent cities. Former deputy mayor, former head of Bloomberg is in charge of it, Dan Doctorow. What's their larger goal into which you play?
So they're an investor in Intersection. Intersection, along with Qualcomm, the chip manufacturer, and Civic Smartscapes, which is a ruggedized industrial-grade manufacturer. Together, we're doing LinkNYC. And so Sidewalk is an investor in Intersection, and we work closely with them on all kinds of projects, data analytics projects, and things like that. Not related necessarily to the Link project yet, but I think their interest is really in trying to figure out kind of what the future of cities looks like, and how you can use analytics and algorithms and all the things you guys have been talking about to really drive better solutions, more efficiencies for city governments, more insight and information into how things can run and should run, and ultimately into service delivery. And I think there's a lot of potential there to really scale up that kind of research and figure out what the right answers are. And so they're at the forefront of that.
So public place Wi-Fi in recent years presumed it was a park and you had a laptop.
Right.
So what's the use case that you envision primarily? What are you already learning about the use case of these things?
Well, people love YouTube.
So is there a percentage of traffic to YouTube?
A lot of traffic to YouTube, a lot of traffic to Facebook.
Are you taking that data and going to release that data?
Actually, from the tablets, where I'm talking about when people log into the tablets online, we don't track anybody's usage on their personal mobile device. But no, I mean, I think people are using it, number one, to offload data. So if they can maintain a cheaper monthly plan, they're able to get data access still while they're moving around the city, which I think is a great benefit. And then and ultimately, I think we don't know. You couldn't have imagined Periscope or YouTube when you were on a 56K modem, right? And now you have gigabit Wi-Fi service, and we don't really know what people are going to do with it. But we think whether you're sort of grabbing a spot at an outdoor cafe and logging onto the Link network, or using your mobile device that is increasingly a more robust computer device, that people are going to find all sorts of ways to use the connectivity, and ways that are advance them professionally, educationally, recreationally. There's really no limit to what we think that connectivity can provide.
I'm well confident you're not going to snoop on individual device activity, but will you have data on, let's say, video usage versus?
Not on the individual device.
You wouldn't
right.
know, okay.
We do, because the tablet is a public screen similar to a library, we do some very basic content filtering just to make sure that it's not it's appropriate. But besides that, we're not looking at that kind of data. So yeah.
Now, actually two questions. First is the phone companies.
Yep.
I imagine in the long run, they're happy. Google Fi starts with a Wi-Fi connection and then fails over to old phone lines. Are the phone companies happy about this because they can reduce their cost and they'll offload onto Wi-Fi calling, or are they unhappy about it because people will need them less? What's the thinking?
I think it depends. It definitely depends. And ultimately, we're talking about a limited amount activity, and I think we have to see how it plays out. But generally speaking, I think a lot of companies, we're not replacing somebody's full data service, right? You're just augmenting it, you're supplementing it, and I think how exactly it plays out and what the business model for how people develop their business models around this new amount of free connectivity remains to be seen. But we're watching it closely. It's 150 live links right now, and so we'll see definitely how it evolves.
Do you imagine in the future that some capability of the Link platform could be made available to academic researchers, for instance?
In terms of the
somehow using the network for for science.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's available to them now if they want to go. There was a quote in the Wall Street Journal, I'm moving my office to the corner of 17th
right.
and 3rd. So anybody who wants to log into the Link network now can definitely use it, and I think we're very interested in partnerships and in making data available and information available through our network and leveraging the capacity that we have to be able to do really robust projects, absolutely. And so I think that's all in the works. We're extremely focused on the deployment now,
sure.
and
got to dig a lot of holes, right?
Got to dig a lot of holes, got to pull down a lot of phone booths, and at the same time pursue other kinds of partnerships that we think are going to be really valuable to the city.
No one's thought about what this would have meant for Superman. There
are 4 units, four Superman phone booths up on the Upper West Side that are landmarked, and that will not be going away.
Really?
So if you want to drop a quarter, you got to head to the
That's actually very
to the
interesting.
Upper West Side if you want to change your suit.
Okay.
Was that part of the kind of negotiation that you had to leave some?
We were. I mean, we wanted to do it. I think there's a piece of nostalgia there, and so the city agreed that it would be a good thing to maintain. So
who owned? Because I think the phone companies actually got out of the payphone business years ago, right? And handed it over to various kind of charlatan companies that would charge you a lot of money for bad connections. Who owned that access?
A variety of different companies, including Titan Outdoor, an outdoor advertising company that's become a part of Intersection. A couple of other outdoor advertising companies have.
So really, for years, it's had nothing to do with phone connectivity. It's just been public space advertising.
I think Verizon had a few and stuff, so it's evolved definitely over time. But they really became much more of advertising units than really public service, communication structures, but now as links, they're all of that and more.
So I said I won the office lottery here, so I have a window.
Yes.
And as I sit overlooking 40th Street, will I have much chance of getting?
It's possible. A lot of glass in commercial buildings and some residential buildings is actually treated to keep out various frequencies of
evil
RF.
rays.
Exactly,
Yes,
exactly. So it depends on how the building is built and what the structure is. But again, our network is really designed for the mobile user, for the person on the go who's moving in and around the city, and that's really our main area of focus. Although we do have reports of people getting service in their apartments.
That'd be nice. Well, God's work. Thank you also for taking down all these really ugly phone booths that were disgusting, and the phones were hanging down, and God knows what had been there. You don't want to touch them.
Tell me how you really feel.
Well, but leads me to one more question. So I'm not totally germphobic, but I do live in New York.
Yep.
So you've got a touchpad there with keys on it that everybody on Earth is going to be touching.
We actually dispatch our cleaning crews twice a week to make sure that each unit is cleaned and in good repair and well maintained. We have agreements on service, so if a screen is broken or a functionality is broken, we're out there as quickly as we possibly can. We're very committed to keeping them operational and clean and safe. And you have a mobile device, so maybe you'll.
No, I'll be using that. Is there a time limit on usage of the kiosk itself?
There's not currently.
So somebody can watch a miniseries there.
We prompt you to time out every few minutes when you're watching a piece of media, and we're currently optimizing that service. We're looking at how people are using it, how long the session lengths are, what kinds of feedback that we're getting from the general public, and we're looking at how to manage that. But the real purpose here is to give people the internet access that they want and need, and so how to do that in a way that balances usage for the most number of users is really our primary focus.
Apart from the commercial advertising on the screens and the mechanism for obviously for people to pull down content information, will the screens give the city or you the ability to communicate?
They do. Yep.
Yeah.
We can post emergency messages, other notifications. We're working with local communities. Each screen is locally addressable, so you can have it on a really hyper local basis to tell people about emergency situations, community activities, other types of promotions happening. We work closely with NYC and company on that.
Are there any sensors in the devices to see traffic passing by or anything else?
There's a variety of sensors related to the functionality of the units. We're working with the city on some pilot projects around environmental sensors.
Right.
So we definitely look forward to upgrading the functionality over time and figuring out how we can use these to best serve the city.
Cams, man, cams.
Well, it's those sensors I'm most excited about for science. I think eventually having 10,000 of these devices around the city, there'll be dissertations written on the data.
Absolutely.
That can come out of them.
Yeah.
So.
We look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and I'll
Thanks
see you
so much.
online.
Take care.
Thanks a lot. Next, Adrian Sas from New York City Parks. And speaking of uses of video publicly and being able to do neat things, come on over. They have a very cool Periscope, and why don't you just tell us hi.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Nice to meet you.
Adrian, Justin?
So tell us what you're doing.
So I work for NYC Parks, which is the city department that cares for nearly 30,000 acres. 14% of the city's land is a park. And we use new media, and more recently, Periscope and Facebook Live to, I go out there to the parks. I haven't been to all 1,700 just yet, but, and show people what's going on and what we're offering them, because it's there for the taking.
Do we have some examples? Annie, were we going to show some stuff? Okay. Well.
We started in the fall with Periscope, and we've done about 50 or 60 broadcasts since then, and then we started using Facebook Live as soon as that became available a couple months ago. Actually, the day Facebook released it, we were out there at the Balto statue in Central Park because it was the anniversary of Balto's heroic voyage or journey through Alaska to save the children from diphtheria outbreak.
Now, what are we seeing here? Which views? Is this from is it Red Hook or Sunset Park? Or
Red Hook.
So it's Valentino Pier, maybe?
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Man. Okay,
Macho
good.
New Yorker, you got it.
And a Brooklynite through and through, I guess.
My kids love the Valentino Pier.
So this is, I guess, a little mini-series of Sunday sunsets, which I've been doing. If it's nice out on a Sunday, I will try and figure out the best view from which to capture it and share it with the world.
So are you talking to people too?
So I'm there by myself usually for the Sunday sunsets, just sort of showing off the view and maybe telling people about the park that we're watching from. And then those broadcasts become incredibly interactive because I'm not interviewing someone, so I can really field the comments and talk to people. It's fun to do because people are so positive. They're so happy to see it, and then you get comments like, "Oh, I'll be there next week, and I'm going to take my kids there." And
that's great.
And it's obviously we're not trying to replace. It's not saying, "Oh, you can watch this now. You don't have to go to the park." It's inspirational, right? And you get ideas about what you can do and where you can go. And I think people are responding to that.
What do you find? I'm curious of this with every usage. Differences between Facebook Live and Periscope in how people are reacting to it.
I think there's a lot of differences actually, and I think maybe because one is born of Twitter and one is born of Facebook, and the communities of followers that we have for each platform are different in the first place. And I think our Facebook users are friends with parks or follow parks because they really want to know what's happening, tomorrow in their neighborhood and that kind of stuff. And I think that the Twitter audience might be a little bit more international, or certainly the Periscope audience is, and they're just sort of more curious about getting a peek at New York and seeing what it's really like. And then the way that the comments stream, on each platform is different. You saw, I think, on the clip that for Periscope, there's this scrolling chat,
right?
And there's also these hearts that people can give you like applause, whereas Facebook. And it's a full screen on Periscope, and you have to decide as a broadcaster if you're going landscape or portrait, and your audience will tell you what they think you should be doing, and you can switch back and forth. And Periscope's gotten better at handling that, by the way, because obviously there's a lot going on in the back end that's making this all possible. But Facebook has decided to dispatch with that or dispense with that, and it's a split screen. So your video is square, and then you have the comments below, and it's actually as you're walking and talking and filming and reading. It's
and
a little
tripping.
and I haven't fallen down yet. It's actually hard to read the Facebook comments. I find it's harder to respond to them. And then also on the replay on Facebook, which sort of lasts. Twitter, Periscope is now just changing it so that the replays will be saved, but the idea was that they were ephemeral and they only lasted 24 hours. Facebook keeps the replay up, which is really nice because then tens of thousands of people get to see them. Yeah. But it doesn't, when you're watching the video, it doesn't scroll with the comments. So I'll be talking about something that you don't necessarily understand why on the replay because you can't see that it's timed in sync with the comment or that I'm responding to a question.
So Periscope's a more natively mobile experience.
Yeah. And the interactive, like live aspect of it is more exploited.
So we are each part of the wonderful bureaucracy of the city of New York, one way or the other. Did you have any bureaucrats fearful of this?
I will say that Parks has been pretty exceptionally supportive, even over the years with experimenting with this kind of technology. I mean, we are, there for the people to get the most out of us. And all the work that we do to care for and maintain the parks is for naught if people aren't out there using them. So the idea that we're encouraging people to do that by educating them about what opportunities are out there is something that I've had a lot of freedom to go ahead and do. And the current commissioner, Mitchell Silver, is very savvy with social media personally, and very supportive of the department using it to get the word out about NYC Parks.
You must have some good bloopers, though.
Like I said, I haven't tripped yet.
Okay.
while multitasking.
Yeah.
People ask questions. I mean, and that's the other thing that's nice about the platform, that we can sort of. And Parks also has been adopting, I think, a very responsive communication platform for dealing with the public, not just on Periscope.
Yeah.
It used to be you would write a letter and then it would go through this bureaucratic chain, and then a month later you would get some. Anyway, but now people can ask me questions about Parks, and I can answer them right away.
Right.
But I'm obviously not a dendrologist or we partnered with the National Park Service on General Grant's birthday, or President Grant's birthday, and we're filming at his tomb because he is entombed in Riverside Park.
The worst old kid's joke. Where is Grant buried?
Yeah.
And so people were asking me all kinds of questions about Civil War history and such, which I studied at one point, but there's certainly other places where you can find out more information about the Civil War than.
Are there any standing cams in any of the parks? Just 24-hour cams?
I think that when we had been involved with hatching some eagles in Inwood Park, and when there was a nest there, we had a live cam. And then
I kind of miss the days. There used to be all kinds of Times Square cams, since we're here on Times Square, which were great. I remember way back when my first time my son got to stay up for New Year's Eve, we watched from a cam on Condé Nast Building, the Death Star, what was then the Condé Nast Building, over to the ball coming down. It was one of the more ignominious moments in my career is I started Burbo Cam on Bourbon Street, and you can imagine, Marty Carl, what people did then. It was revealing in ways that we didn't anticipate.
The internet.
Yeah, we did. I kind of wish there were more just standing cams that people could look at. Now that we're back into live video online, I love the fact that you can go out and choose what to do. But I also like that serendipity of just being able to see stuff. I wish on the LinkNYC there were some cams just to see what's going on on 8th Avenue today. You know, so just another hope that the live video just becomes even more ubiquitous again.
It is incredible how many. I mean, you get around just to the parks in Brooklyn, just the incredible diversity of what's on offer, and you know, it's just an amazing way to meet people. You must come across a lot of characters, I'd assume, who wanna get into the frame. Is that something that happens?
Yeah, it people get really excited to be on TV.
Sure.
You know?
Still.
Yeah.
That's what. But you do the depth and breadth of the parks is tremendous. So there's certainly no shortage of content for me to cover, and then the characters that I find
that
there
emerge.
also add to the vivacity of the broadcast.
That's
I think.
great.
Right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and go out. What's the park today you're going to?
Later this week, I will be in Prospect Park filming the goats that we've brought in to do some landscaping.
Oh, great. That's great.
They're great.
Nice to meet you.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Take care.
Thanks. Yeah.
Adrian Sas from New York Parks. And finally, Ali Hamed, a VC at Coventure, who I think is getting mic'd up right now. Here we go. And talk about back to the money end of New York. Ali.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
So you have a very interesting story, and I hate it when other people try to tell stories, so why don't you tell your own story?
Which part?
Just kind of from
into
youth
it
up, yeah. Well, from youth up, and then
Sure.
Yeah.
So grew up in Southern California. Peaked really hard at 16. I was an All-American baseball player, and so it's all sort of downhill from there. All my baseball friends now think I'm an IT guy at Best Buy at this point. And fractured my back in 2 places in college. Realized playing Pac-10 baseball was a lot harder than playing Ivy League baseball. I wanted to go beat up on a bunch of nerds, so I figured I'd go to Cornell. And when I got there, IBM had just come out with its software development kit for Watson, so we built an NLP engine that could identify motion sentiment news articles. We licensed it to traders that could trade things like commodities on sentiment analysis. And kind of an interesting experience, built a business, grew to about 30 people, and then ended up running out of money, as some businesses do, and which is why I'm not on a beach somewhere. And after that point, I just started doing consulting. I would go find clients, and I was an expert in whatever they needed. I'd subcontract out the work of people who actually did know what they were doing. I'd just sort of learn from them and become like the partner on the job. At the time, I remember like one of my bigger clients ended up firing me because I was charging too little, and they realized I was like a 19-year-old in college. He was a sole proprietor. Like the first time they got an invoice, and I was thinking like, wow, $100 an hour, this is really great, which is not what BCG charges. So anyway, so I was doing consulting for a bit. It's a little bit soul crushing. And I wanted to start angel investing, and I realized that venture capital in general is pretty messed up. So if you think about how seed investing traditionally works, basically you take what a Series A fund does, and the seed fund strategy is let's raise less money and hire less people, and that's like our strategy for a new type of investing. And people would give me basis points if I wrote a $20,000 check into a business, which is really all the capacity I had at the time. But they'd give me like 5-10 points if we just coded their app. And I realized it was actually easier to raise capital than it was to find good software developers. And so there was an arb in that. The other part is we didn't really know any of the VCs who could code. So you have like a bunch of non-technical people investing in technology businesses. When at that point the biggest risk is will you build it, right? So if you think about most VC firms, they want to invest post-product because they want to mitigate execution risk. And their way of mitigating technical risk and execution risk is going to find a couple kids at Google or Palantir who know how to code but don't know anything about healthcare. Right, so there's technical risk and market risk, and so they mitigate technical risk because they know how to do diligence on market risk and not on technical risk. Like their strategy for technical diligence is finding some CTO in their portfolio who's probably like out to lunch and being like, hey, do you mind talking to the founders of this company and seeing if they're actually going to build
Make
this
sure they're
thing?
using the right vocabulary, right?
Well, yeah, and the CTO is probably sitting there like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Like, why are you asking me?
Yeah.
I'm not getting paid for this. And so it's just crazy that that's how it works. The other thing that's nuts is you have all these founders who find some kid who can code and call that person CTO. And like being a CTO and coding an app are sort of two different jobs, which is like sort of this mind-blowing thing to a lot of people. if you ask most VCs to define a product manager versus a project manager, they might not know what that is. They might not know the difference between infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, right?
Right.
Which is like really scary that people give them money. And so I figured like the bar for being a good manager of a seed fund was really low. And so that was sort of where we entered. And then over time, and we started building software for the companies we invested in. So we just invested in very deep domain experts. So we're in a farm lending business founded by a former farmer, warranty claims business, like things that are a little esoteric and outside of traditional venture capital. And we also started a fund that buys securities from alternative lending platforms. So these are platforms like not Lending Club, but businesses like Lending Club. I kind of gave you a lot there, but the overall thesis is venture capital as an asset class is really built to support a homogenous group of founders who are all solving everyone else's problems. So if you go to the Valley, and like a lot of my best friends live there, but if you go there, it's like this feeling of, hey, we're all really smart here. We're all very efficient and like do things the right way, and we should be our own country, even that's how good we are. Let's go build apps and solve other people's problems, right? And these companies are sort of built from this place of judgment at their core. But if you let domain experts solve their own problems, they're built with empathy at their core, and there's a little bit more of a nuanced understanding of what those people need. And the founders that will build those companies are a little bit more diverse. And so we're hoping that it's not a bunch of idiots like me building every company that exists in the future. We want them to come from a much more diverse subset of backgrounds. And so that's more or less.
And you're in New York.
Yeah.
So why did you choose New York?
Probably you get a little bit of negative selection bias if you can't find a technical co-founder in San Francisco or Boston because there's so many engineers. I think that, the greatest part about living in New York is how diverse people are, right? Whether it's, from a socioeconomic standpoint, race, religion, to what industry you're in, right? Like that's the cool part, right? I live in Brooklyn, which is becoming less diverse. My partners are convinced I live in the ghetto because I live in Williamsburg. And because of that, you can sort of take technology and sort of put it in industries that have traditionally not had it. Entrepreneurship is a cross-disciplinary exercise, right? The greatest things happen when you take one knowledge set and combine it with another knowledge set that traditionally don't cross-pollinate.
Well, this is the point you were making, that New York is the and. The argument we have here, it's an and. That it's technology and journalism
tech-enabled and
finance. What were some of the companies?
Commercial real estate, children's media, just a real range of some of the ones that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so cool about it. Yeah, I'm clearly not an expert in fashion, but
you're a good company.
But we've invested in a couple of beauty businesses, and the diligence on my end takes a little bit longer than, say, like an alternative lending platform.
Technology and beauty?
Yeah. I think that, look, beauty has traditionally focused on one type of person, right? We're investing in a business called Trace Noir, and it is in-home hairstyling for minority women, right? Different races have different hairstyles and hair types. And traditionally, most salons don't know how to deal with that. If you're an African-American woman living in Manhattan, it's very hard to find someone who can style your hair.
Right.
You can imagine my diligence process was a little wonky on that, right? A lot of walking into hair salons. And I clearly was not the target demographic. We're starting to see a bunch of plus-sized e-commerce brands. We've done diligence on a few and haven't gotten there on any yet. But it's probably going to happen. Gwynnie Bee is a really interesting business. Whether it's that, and we also do a lot of pattern recognition looking at industries. So we'll go from beauty to finance. I started watching TV recently. TV is freaking awesome. It is so much easier than reading. And what we realized is lending works the same as Netflix, right? So Netflix was a customer acquisition tool. Eventually started underwriting customers, figure out what they wanted to watch, and then started producing their own shows. Lending Club is a toothpaste business, right? It's just a brand. You recognize it, and you acquire customers using this brand and like a better UX. But like innovation 2.0 in lending is probably underwriting customers better and figuring out, we're in one business.
Risk management.
Risk management, like we're in a business that it gives scheduling software to employers, and those employers, use that to figure out when they're, imagine a Pret employee is going to come into work, and then they pay the company every 2 weeks, and the company tells the employees they can take their paycheck any day of the week they want. And what it does is it's arbing the credit risk of subprime borrower and replacing payday lending with it by assessing the credit risk of their employer, right? Like that's a lot more interesting than just being a better user experience.
Yeah.
And then the next part is they're going to have like more interesting ways of lowering the cost of capital, just like Netflix produces its own shows, right? So whether they set up a BDC, an MLP, or come up with go out to retail investors because retail investors have lower cost of capital than a family office or whatever it might be. And so that's sort of how because we're not very smart people, so we have to use pattern recognition to figure out what makes sense in an industry. And so that's our way of thinking about industries.
So Justin runs a lab where bright young people come in and want to start new things and try new things and build them. I've started a program here in entrepreneurial journalism where we try to prove it's not an oxymoron.
Sure.
And convert communist to capitalist, as I'm fond of saying.
Yeah. We got to teach them how banks work first, right? Like I bet you 99% of people don't know what return on equity means for a bank. Right, and like a good way of converting people from communist to capitalist is being like, this is sort of like what Basel III said about liquidity requirements and shit, stuff.
It's the internet. You can say what you like.
Okay. Well, the YouTube screws us over there. Yeah. So we're trying to. Yesterday we had our pitch day here, where we had 19 entrepreneurial journalism students presenting their businesses, which was really cool. And the problem that I have here, I'll be curious to hear Justin's next. The problem I have here is that we can have people see through their good ideas, but they don't have a team to build a prototype to get the funding.
Yeah.
They're isolated as journalists, and everybody needs technologists, and there's not enough technologists in the world. The ones who are there are snotty and difficult, and
we're the worst.
Right. So because you can be, because everybody wants you. Everybody loves you.
I think it's because most people who are engineers spend their whole life not being cool, and suddenly they're cool. And they're like, this is awesome.
That. What about you? What's your biggest challenge?
Well, I think it's interesting. I'd be interested to know some of the sort of technology areas that you think are the ripest to be applied across those various. I mean, you were into NLP, for instance. We see a lot of people working on NLP and other data sciences. Kind of, you see a lot of computer vision kind of coming along now into commercialization. What are the sort of technologies that are fundamentally you're seeing being applied across many different sectors that you think are ready to disrupt the markets?
So I think, honestly, the most interesting stuff is, how do you kind of get, like, so NLP and machine learning, I think we're still solving stats problems, so calculus problems, and I think that we're, like, sort of a long way for that being so interesting. I think if you look at a lot of these AI companies, someone said mostly automated as a service, whatever the acronym is, and I started calling them sort of automated as a service.
Sort of automated, yeah.
And probably have a lot more to do with people in the Philippines answering questions than, actual machine learning.
A lot of Wizard of Oz going on there.
Yeah,
or just simple decision trees.
Yeah, and by the way, the amount of times people come in and tell us that they're using machine learning, it's really just a rules-based system, is a little bit heartbreaking.
We did a project last summer where we tore down various IoT products and found that many that sort of suggest they have, machine learning inside them really don't have.
But that's okay, and I don't think you need it. And I think, honestly, the stuff that for us is most interesting now, like, I don't think we have mobile apps at a certain point, or how we used to have desktop apps, and then the browser got pretty badass. And I think that, like, our mobile browsers will get good enough, right? And so I'm pretty bummed that Dolphin never worked out. I'm pretty bummed that a few of these other ones haven't worked out, but I'm pretty sure Chrome will solve that at some point. It will never have, it is crazy that we actually have mobile apps, just like we had, like, I feel like I'm putting a CD into my phone, right? So things like that, like, there's a number of, I think everyone will know how to code, but I don't think coding will be the same, right? Coding will probably be a little bit more drag and drop. We're investing in a company called VidCode that's trying to make, basically what they've done is they've built a photo editing tool, but you have to code to use it. And so you have, like, all these teenagers coding and they don't even realize they're coding. So I think in terms of new technologies, AI probably matters, but that's sort of like a computing problem as much as it is a algorithm problem. So I'm more interested in sort of like things that you'll look at and be like, how did that ever exist like that before?
Right.
And I think that native mobile apps is probably the one that I think is most offensive still.
Okay. All right.
So yeah, I mean, like, things like Ionic are cool, Meteor is cool, and just depends on the communities that get around them.
Cool.
So do you have any advice for
the entrepreneurs?
For the entrepreneurs,
what should they be pursuing?
Geniuses.
I would say, so the hardest part, especially when, like, and I fall into this a lot, right? Because when you're young, you're supposed to know everything and be really cool. Is you spend so much time trying to be interesting that you forget to be interested in stuff. And I think that, like, if you just end up, like, sort of being, this interesting thing happens when you talk to someone, you listen to what they're saying, you learn, and you become more organically interesting over time, and you find and you discover problems that are traditionally not found by students of a certain age group. And the amount of startups that we see founded to solve the problems of male Caucasian 24-year-olds is a lot, right? Because the problems that we see, and when you start finding problems that serve a minority voice that traditionally hasn't been heard before, and by the way, we've all fooled ourselves into thinking they're heard because of digital media. I would say digital media might have created greater socioeconomic disparity, right? Because for the first time, readers are not aligned with the writers. The readers are the cost of goods sold that you sell to advertisers and free content, right? And so the cost of goods sold is acquiring users that you can, but the wealthiest read the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and they're the only ones aligned with their readers, right? So you have like this crazy disparity of minorities still not having their voices heard, even though we all convinced ourselves that they are.
We could spend an hour talking about that.
We certainly could. But this goes to the other debate that I hear in my world, which is the debate around scale. That some would say not everything has to scale. That if you're trying to serve a community and you can do it with terribly great efficiency, and really focus in on higher relevance and value to that community, that you don't have to scale to be the gigundo thing you used to have to be.
Yeah, that's probably an asset class problem at this point, right? There just isn't. Venture firms aren't structurally built to back those types of businesses. So basically, the best VC firms just became bigger. And so, like if you think about Andreessen Horowitz, they might have owned 10% of Instagram, but they're $1 billion fund. They've got to return $3 billion to their LPs, and they made $100 million on Instagram, which is a lot, but they have to find 30 Instagrams. That's sort of like a pain, right? Sort of tricky. And so but I think what you're starting to see is VC funds are raising different types of funds and becoming closer to asset managers. So like growth funds are in vogue, right, or opportunity funds. And I think that you'll also find VC firms eventually start raising, I don't know what they're going to call it, but funds that back opportunities that are in their portfolio. You've invested, but you've discovered that the market isn't as big as you thought it was. And your option is either to have like a fire sale, or maybe you do capitalize them out of a different type of fund, and your customers, the LPs, are already your customers, and you can sell them a new product and get a little bit more AUM. So I think that that'll be solved over time. And that's our fault for not fixing it yet, and we've kind of screwed entrepreneurs for it.
Well, these crowdfunding, equity...
the Jobs Act finally took effect this week.
Yeah, I think that a lot of retail investors are going to get screwed, right? Like if I could have 1,000 retail investors or like one great LP, I'm not going with 1,000 retailers. No.
So you're a naysayer on that particular front.
I mean, look, I think a lot of bad ideas are going to get funded. It's going to be the same as Kickstarter campaigns where the product never gets built.
Right.
So I think, or maybe we'll go through the the trough of disenchantment.
Disillusionment.
Yeah, disillusionment. Whatever. I don't know those big words. But. Right, and it'll happen, people get screwed, and then eventually it gets a little bit better.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at Kickstarter, the amazing thing has been that it's still a minority of projects that end up in that circumstance. So perhaps the crowd on the whole knows better. We'll see.
I think that there's opportunity to co-invest. So like Lending Club is probably the first crowdfunder, right? Like you actually have retail investors who aren't getting screwed. Well, theoretically, it sounds like Lending Club kind of screwed Jefferies, but traditionally not getting screwed and actually getting return. I don't really know anyone else who's done crowdfunding like that. I think,
there were some earlier equity crowdfunding platforms that didn't quite make it to this moment. I think
AlphaWorks.
But there are a couple that are still at it. AlphaWorks is, I think, still at it.
And this might also solve the problem, though, of going after opportunities that don't scale to the same degree that venture investors scale. So cost of capital of retail investors is traditionally lower than the cost of capital of an asset manager, which is then lower than a hedge fund, which is then lower than a family office, right? So if you think about what return is required by somebody. And I think that as people realize that alternatives are no longer alternative and they just have to be in private markets because they can't make money in public markets anymore, whether it's because firms like Two Sigma just make it too efficient, or you can't compete in public markets. Wealth just isn't being created. So I think that people's expectations for what they have to make due to liquidity in an alternative asset class is probably going to come down. And so you can actually generate less returns and still raise more capital into your fund. And retail investors are the greatest example of a low cost of capital. And so maybe that'll be the solution.
This is better than baseball, isn't it?
No, hell no. Dude, you get way more girls in baseball.
Oh, man. A lot more fun to play baseball.
So one more question. We're trying to talk about technology in New York.
Yeah.
And what it's going to take, and this is on a network of podcasts that's in California, so we've got a second city syndrome here now in New York. We talked a few weeks ago on this show about what it's going to take for New York to take off in greater development of companies. And the argument made by...
our portfolio rocks. It's taking off?
Well, that's the question. So there were investors who were arguing that we need more great exits in New York. Is New York already there and we're just not seeing it? What does New York need?
Sounds like their LPs aren't very happy. They should just be better investors. No, look, you've got firms like First Round who have absolutely knocked it out of the park. Union Square has knocked it out of the park here. I think that it takes time. I think that, look, a tech company, so Silicon Valley is better at building tech companies, and New York's better at building tech-enabled businesses. Yes. I think tech-enabled businesses probably don't have the same opportunity as tech company because, like, Google's a utility, right, at this point. Palantir's convinced people it's a tech company. It's probably a consulting business, with a little bit of technology. But it'll happen. Blue Apron is a food business, right? That's sort of a big deal. Food's important. I eat food. I don't know if you, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think LA is also a huge opportunity. Mm-hmm. But I think just by definition, you probably go after vertical markets once you're enabling technology to a vertical. And if you are the technology enabling everything, you might have a tech-enabled bank at some point. You might have like the next Blackstone. I think if Blackstone had been founded in 2014, it would have been founded by a bunch of engineers.
Yeah. What does tech-enabled journalism look like in that vision of yours? Media.
I think media is absolutely crazy, and I'm sure you do too. But I think that like my kids will look at movies and be like, "How the hell did you watch every movie in 2 hours?" Like when I read Shakespeare, I was so annoyed that the story was told within a structure. And now the structure of a story is told because of the story, right? We start sentences with the word "and." Books are different pages in length. Sentences are a different amount of words. And HBO has made it so that we now create the structure around the story rather than the other way around. I feel totally gypped that Harry Potter wasn't told as an HBO show, where the first book would have been 8 hours, and the second book would have been 10, and then, and told over many episodes. The other thing that's crazy about HBO and Netflix is that every episode is the same length, right? So, like, when I read a book, every chapter is in 10 pages. It depends on when the subplot ends, right? So I've noticed that I start watching shows, and I end wherever the hell I think the subplot ended, not when, like, some arbitrary 40-minute time block ended. Right. And so I think that...
Not to mention it's all two-dimensional.
Yeah, and I think... so I've read something interesting that I hadn't really thought about, which is that when it's two-dimensional, it allows the storyteller to tell you where the focus is.
That's right.
And if we leave ourselves up to our own devices, like I have ADD, so I'm going to be like over here while someone's getting murdered, But, but it's inevitable, right? That like we're going to be in the story, and maybe we'll be part of it, and maybe we'll be able to design the story. But there's going to only be a lot of things that our kids are like, man, your shit sucked,
Yeah, it did. It did. Go back to your earlier business, the sentiment analysis in news articles.
Yeah. Oh man, it was so rules based. We called it NLP, and we just like weighted news articles at the top.
How would you do that today? Is there value there? Do news articles to actually tell you anything? Would you if you did the same? If you brought the same thing to Facebook or Twitter, would it be more valuable?
No, I mean, look, there's people who do a lot better. It was kind of a cool idea in 2000. This is when people didn't know what the cloud was still, right? Yeah. At this point, what we were doing is pretty elementary. And
most impressive when I saw was a piece of research by a university professor who was literally pulling photos of CEOs from public appearances, running some computer vision, facial recognition, emotion recognition algorithms. And found he was able to predict stock performance based on the facial appearance of the CEO.
But here's what scares the heck out of me about stuff like this is you become so convinced that you're right because it's an algorithm and blah blah, and it leaves yourself to the black swan problem, right? Absolutely. Which is like the more convinced that you're right, the less you start thinking about black swans and the greater scale you do it at.
And somebody with a better poker face probably gets away with it.
Yeah. So and all of that stuff makes me nervous, but it's because I'm not smart as those guys are, so they probably get it more than I do.
Last question. I think I said that before, but I lie. Your relationship to the VC community in New York.
Oh, we're homies.
Right. I mean, you all see the same companies.
Yeah. Some of them try to hire us to do diligence for them. Tech diligence, yeah.
Really? So what is that community like now versus the Valley?
Okay. Oof. This is a long... I'll try to keep it short. The VCs in New York have gotten much better. I think that to start a VC fund, you have to be good at fundraising, not good at investing. And I think the people who are still investing are, getting better. They're learning. I think, though, that in the Valley, people have made their money in tech, so they started as pretty qualified people. In New York, they made their money usually outside of tech and start funds because they had access to capital. And what you'll see is the people who are really good in New York ended up going upstream. They have larger funds, and so they're a little bit later stage. And the new funds, like the $20, $40 million funds, they're often backed by people who, this is their first fund. The problem is when they have to raise their next fund, it's only 2.5 years, maybe 2 years from today. And they're not going to have exits. They're not going to have a lot of markups. The only KPI they're going to have is who am I co-investing with? If I'm in a bunch of deals with first-round capital, it's like hiring McKinsey. I'm probably doing pretty well. So people become logo hunters, not just in the companies they're trying to invest in, but in the people they're co-investing with. And so you have a lot of people who are investing with no conviction. If you are a VC and you don't lead your own deals, what you're basically saying is I'm not good enough at the job that I have to do all day long to come up with my own opinion. and you're going to have this crazy regression to the mean. And if you look at how VC firms are structured, the more diversified you see a fund, the smaller checks they write and the more diverse they are, the earlier they are and the dumber they think they are. And the later stage you are is the smarter you think you are, and the bigger the check size, the more concentrated, the later you are, and the smarter you think you are. If you look at Founders Fund, Peter Thiel sort of thinks he's smart, and he invests like he thinks he's smart. And by the way, he's freaking smart, right? And his performance rocks. And it's a really concentrated portfolio because he's optimizing to thinking, I can actually pick stocks. People who index the venture community are basically saying, I can't pick stocks, I'm not smart enough. And the earlier you are, the less data you have to make that assessment. And I think that probably not enough people are trying to be are investing with conviction and concentrating enough portfolios in New York. And I think that in the Valley, people have a little bit more guts.
Jeff and I were at a conference last week that had a panel on diversity in venture capital, and it largely focused. The title of the thing was on gender diversity in venture capital, but the conversation also touched on diversity more broadly.
Yeah.
There were folks on the panel from Graycroft and Firstmark, I think. Do you think New York's doing anything better or worse in that regard than other venture communities?
So it's newer, so it's easier probably to make advances faster, just like mobile banking in Africa. It's new. You don't have all the legacy crap. And so when you start something from zero, you can make changes with all the knowledge, and the Valley kind of figured out that it didn't have enough diversity, and New York had the benefit of starting a bit later, and I bet LA actually ends up being more diverse than even New York will be. And so I should preface with, I'm a white male, so how qualified am I to answer this question? But I think that the fact that the industries are a little bit more diverse, the demographic of New York is probably a little bit more diverse, we have a greater obligation to fight for diversity because we have a better opportunity to make it work. I think our portfolio, we're really proud. I think in the last 13 companies, we've backed 3 Caucasian males. And the reason we think it is because we don't invest in the traditional type of founder, because of sort of our thesis, and we look for domain experts and people from different industries. So almost it's not part of our thesis to back a certain demographic of founder, but it's just happened. But I do think New York has a really big obligation. I think LA also has a big obligation, and the Valley needs to figure it out. And I think there's enough people working hard at it. Not everyone is, and it'll take a little bit of time. I think that the encouraging thing is entry-level positions have probably got a little bit more diverse, but senior-level positions haven't. The easy way out is to say, well, you have to work in this position for a while before you become senior. It's probably a little true, but not that true. And if I go any further, I'm just going to get myself in trouble by saying something stupid. But it's important.
I think that's a watchword for the show right now because I think we're about out of time.
Good, cool.
So we'll stop before we say something stupid.
Yeah.
Ali, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Justin, great to have you here.
Thank you.
Really grateful.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great work at NYC Media Lab. And
thanks for the opportunity.
Delighted to partner with you on all kinds of things. So that is it. Another one in the can, another beta, another lesson learned. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Just say it nicely, but be constructive. We need the help. Next week, you'll be glad to know I'm not here. We're going to have a co-host. Are we saying who the co-host is, Annie?
Next week.
Yeah. Who's?
No, we don't know.
We're not saying yet. Okay. So we'll have somebody wonderful and surprising and amazing next week, I think, and other good guests. So our first 3 episodes are also on YouTube. Please do take a look. The first one was out of this format entirely, a debate with Emily Bell about Facebook good or evil. The next 2 were all kinds of fun, as was this one. And so we're going to keep learning and get out of beta pretty soon and have a regular show coming on. But meanwhile, we just want to try new stuff. So thanks very much. That's it. Goodbye.